Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for this presentation. Today we have a grower panel of growers all throughout the PNW. And today we're just going to discuss these guys' experience growing canola, what they've learned, and just have a good discussion about things we're doing and not doing, and hopefully be something for everyone to take away at the end of it. We have with us Frank Grunewig from Three Forks, Montana, Josh Sherwood from Wilbur, Washington, Jesse Brunner from Elmira, Washington, myself, Chris Riggers from Craigmont, Idaho, and Aaron G. Feller from Thornton, Washington. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll start off with Frank from Three Forks.
All right. Well, hello everyone. So my name is Frank Grunewig. I live in Three Forks, Montana. Actually, haven't been there very long. We moved our family from Canada back in March, and our farm is at Three Forks, Montana, about 30 miles west of Bozeman. We have an average precipitation there of 12 inches to 13 inches of moisture. And this past year was fairly dry. We were at about 7 inches for the whole year. We do about 25% fallow and 75% crops. Crops we grow are wheat, chickpeas, winter canola, but also trying different ones. We may do a little bit of spring canola. We'll be maybe doing some lentils or some yellow peas, safflowers, sunflowers. Just I like to experiment. So we moved from Saskatchewan, where I farmed there for about 18 years. Before that, I actually grew up in France. So in Saskatchewan, canola was a big part of our crop rotation. It was about a third to half of the farm in spring canola, and I had the pleasure to serve on the Saskatchewan Canola Development Commission, the Canadian Canola Growers and Grain Growers of Canada. So I'm actually going to go through this past year. I always was actually intrigued about winter canola, and the farm we bought had not done any. Probably in around 2005, I grew a little bit of winter canola in Saskatchewan, and it didn't turn out very well. They were varieties from Oklahoma, and so in Montana, as we all know, well, the rotation is not all that diversified, and I thought, well, it'd be nice to have to be able to bring another broadleaf and a different herbicide and different weed control in. So I'm putting a little bit this presentation in a year in review. And so when I started to investigate about how to grow winter canola, I was told that it was very important to actually not have that much stubble. And the rep told me to look at something like maybe chickpea stubble. So here is August 12th of 2019. We use a 1895 John Deere drill, so disc drill. The rest of our farm is harvested with stripper headers. So the disc drill is very important for us to be able to go through the stubble. But in this particular occasion, this is chickpeas stubble, but fallow. So there's a year of chem fallow in between. And so, as I said, August 12th, 19th, as you can see there on the title. So establishment in canola, I guess, as it's always probably the most you get the crop established. After that, it's probably 2/3 of the battle right there. The advantage compared to spring canola, what surprised me is, of course, we have, and in August we have the warm ground, and if there's a little bit of moisture, it can take off very quickly, and it starts very well. The problem at that time can be grasshoppers, and in the last couple of years, grasshoppers were pretty strong. And I was very surprised to see the seed treatment being that effective on grasshopper. Out here.
There we go, Frank.
Back. Okay.
We lost
All
you.
right. Okay, so I'm gonna have to just get request control again here. Okay, hopefully. All right. October 25, it was just a beautiful stand, probably the best looking canola stand I had ever seen. And the moisture was pretty good at the time. It had really done well. The fertility was all placed ahead of time, and there was about 80 pounds of nitrogen, about 25 pounds of phos, and 15 or 20 pounds of sulfur, all put in the mid row. Except for the phos was put with the seed. November 11th, you start to get some of the winter is making it look kind of tough, and yeah, at that point we had snow on and off in that winter, and then we get into April, and at that point you think like, whoa, what do we have here? Like, there's no way this is going to survive. And talk to a few people, to talk to some and we start to look at the crown, and it's I don't know if my mouse shows on it. Does it show where, if I'm pointing something? So but you start to look a little closer, and there's a little bit of green, and you start to pull some of the plants and cut right at the crown, right at the taproot. And at that point you see that there's still life and it's not mushy, and that's the important part. As I was saying a little bit earlier, I was told to go on with something that didn't have very much stubble, and the big deal here is that you do not want to have any length between the taproot and the there's a terminology for it, the petiole, I think, or the and this part here needs to be very close to the ground. And if there's any extension, that's where the weak point is during winter. So it's very important to have the cotyledon come out of the ground and not have any extension of a stem. Otherwise, it can have a whole lot more winter kill right there. So as you can see, I mean, at that point, it's fairly depressing, and you start to wonder what's going to happen. So about a month later, things came back, and still it's really only from the first picture of where it looked so great in October. It definitely had some plants lost. It was not a particularly hard winter, probably something a bit more average, but some of the things that we struggle with is you get these times getting 50-degree, and you all wonder a little bit about a false start, and we had plenty of these times. But it came out of winter okay. It never looked as good into the big cabbage spot as maybe back in October, but it was there. Also, by then it was very dry, super dry. We had decent subsoil moisture, and a decent amount of snow. But by May, it was definitely very dry. June, it started to branch out and going into flowering, and it looked it looked okay. I mean, it was not the best looking crop, and again, it just didn't rain that much. In June, we had a couple inches of rain, and that's really what saved it. And but the flowering didn't last all that long, and I didn't know what to think, what we were going to get. In July, that's always the funny part about canola. It can branch, and if the conditions are halfway decent, it took advantage of some of the rain we had in June, and branch. It was an okay looking crop. And then I guess we go into August 18th. So we only had 120 acres, and we had about 3,000 acres of winter wheat. I was hoping we'd be able to harvest the canola before the winter wheat, but um, because of somewhat the tough spring we had, it was somewhat patchy, and it took a while to ripen properly. We did some reg loan to bring it a little faster, but when you have a 120 acres versus 3,000 acres of canola of winter wheat, you tend to maybe focus on the winter wheat first. So I was concerned by some of the windstorms we had, and I thought we would lose a fair bit to wind, but I was pleasantly surprised to see very minimal wind shelling. And we harvested it with straight cut headers, and I speak in bushels an acre from the Canadian side of it, but right at 23 or 25 bushel. So which is what, 1,200 pounds an acre, which is not a great crop, but considering on similar land right across the road, we had like 35 bushel winter wheat. I thought, that was all right. And I guess lucky enough, I didn't sell it, and I'm still looking at selling it now. So it may, per profit per acre, might actually be my best crop this past year, but all by a fair bit of luck on that side of things. So that's where it's at for my operation.
Thanks, Frank. I've got a quick question for you. What were the conditions there from, I guess, middle to late winter into April, where you have that picture where the canola just looks basically dead?
Well, that's when you had all these false starts where you'd get, into the 45, 50, and then you'd get down back into the 20s. And we had that 4 or 5 times. So fairly dry, open, not very much snow cover. And it looked dead. I didn't know what to think about it. And since it wasn't also that many acres, I thought, well, we'll just tough it out and see what happens. But I'd have been very tempted at that point to terminate it and do something else. So it's amazing how it revived. And this fall, we seeded another 150 acres, and the grasshopper part of it, we lost a fair bit to grasshoppers. It's very patchy, and right now, and it's looking tough, no doubt. Like you can hardly think that. You 150 antelopes that were grazing on that, and that was maybe not very helpful for winter survivability. Even though, I mean, as you see, it did all right. If we would have had normal rainfalls, I think we could have been into the 3,000 pounds an acre area. I think that could have been.
Frank, I'm afraid we're losing you.
Yeah, I'm back.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think as well, if you wouldn't have had all those false starts, it seems like that really just set the canola back a lot. And if you're, if the maturity would have been a little sooner, it probably would have added a lot of yield um, then too.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions from anyone on the panel? If not, we will move to Josh.
All righty. So my name is Josh Sherwood. I farm south of Wilbur, uh, primarily 12-inch rainfall area. Grow winter canola, winter wheat, and a little bit of triticale. Not many spring crops out where we're at. We have done a little bit of spring canola on some CRP takeout and stuff, but the spring canola turned out better than I would have thought. We were over 1,000 pounds, which I was happy with for as far as comparing to spring wheat, what we usually do out here. So, but mainly winter wheat, winter trit, and then a winter canola is our rotation. As far as farming practices, I guess our canola is always conventional, seeded with a HZ drill, 16-inch split packer. So we're making summer fall on a minimum till situation, just enough to get the HZ through the winter wheat stubble. But the battle we've had is I've been trying to go chem fallow as much as I can. I chem fallow wheat, and then I'll make summer fallow out of the wheat stubble the second year to go to canola for that third year. But if I could get into a situation where I'm comfortable with a drill that gets the stands that the HZ does in a chem fallow situation, I probably wouldn't do any tillage. But we're still playing around with it. I do have an SDX single disc drill with the John Deere. It's a ready egg conversion that has the John Deere Pro Series opener on that single disc case drill. So we've played around with it. It's set up 10-inch spacing. I'm probably gonna look at going with if I can make a row cleaner work, try to get a row cleaner on it and just go 20-inch. I think 20-inch spacing would work well in our area, especially knowing we do 16 already with the HZ drills. So I think 20 would be fine and would work well. The canola fallow, as far as the canola stubble that we're fallowing, we usually don't touch it in the fall. We leave it standing, catch as much snow as we can, and we just mow it in the spring and do like a 1 or 2 pass light fallow with it and seed it. So that's what's been nice about canola is it's taken operations away from our regular conventional fallow system. I mean, we've cut out quite a few operations just with having canola stubble. So that's helped out a lot, and it seemed to work really well. The chem fallow we're doing with our wheat stubble, with what I've been playing with, the wheat stubble, we've had some pretty good wheat crops the last few years, so we've had a lot of stubble to work with. We either mow it or we have a Great Plains Turbo Max that we run usually around the end of July. If it's usually when it's starting to get dry there in that top's getting hard, we try to fluff it up and beat up some stubble with that Turbo Max, and then direct seed it with that SDX. And last year, this last fall, we've made it work pretty well. It was by far our best results. So we're getting somewhere there. But I know a lot of people around here are playing with the same thing and seem to be making it work pretty well with direct seed and canola. I know it's pretty picky, temperamental stuff that you got to be careful with your packing pressure and how deep you're going, and that's what the HZ drills are nice, because you're not packing anything behind it. It's a split packer. You're placing your seed and some dirt's falling in on top, and that's it. So the other thing we're doing with our Kim Follow, before we seed our canola, we're putting our fertilizer down with a Coulter, Yetter Coulter setup. I don't know if some guys are familiar with, other people have set these up, but they have a frame mount that has a lot more parts to this Yetter Coulter than what I've done. We had a chisel plow on the farm that wasn't really being used, and this is actually a neighbor's that wanted us to set it up on his, but it's the same kind of setup that we have. But basically we took a Yetter, if you can see my arrow here. Basically this Yetter bar is a Yetter factory bar, but we built a template here that just bolts onto a chisel plow, and you can see we've added some weight, but it's a good way to get the fertilizer down. I like to have my fertilizer down before. This is a picture of basically the template we built that bolts right onto the Yetter arm. Like I said, it seems to work well. You're doing it. We usually do it 1st of June when the ground's pretty mellow still, and you're not battling dry top or anything. But our fertilizer is down when I go to direct seed canola. I'm not putting anything down with the canola besides a little bit of starter, which I haven't set up yet, but I'd like to. But we have in the past stream jetted our canola in the fall. Before I set this up, we have done the stream jet fertilizer. You're just in our area in the fall, we might not get the rain when it's time to go fertilize, and then it might freeze up on you, and you might be out of luck and be doing it in the spring and banking on rain in the spring to push your fertilizer down with the stream jet. But this is a picture after the Coulter went through, so you can see it's next to no disturbance. You can hardly tell you're even out there. So that's why I like it. We don't leave any open ground. We're not drying anything out. We're leaving the stubble where it is, and seems to work pretty well. So like I said, we're mainly, we planted 1,200 acres of canola last year. 1,000 of it was conventional ground with the HZ drills. We know that works, but like I said, if I can make this system work a little better and stick with it, I think there won't be much tillage left on our operation is kind of our goal. So yeah, I've been watching a lot of neighbors, talking with them. Everybody's doing a little bit of stuff different, but I think we're all getting there kind of together, learning the hard way, but we're getting there. So I think that's about all I had as far as fertility and how we grow canola out here. So are there any other questions?
Yeah, Josh. So are you guys seeding Roundup ready or non-GMO varieties?
We are primarily all the spring canola we've done has been GMO, but just for CRP takeout. But as far as winter canola, it's all non-GMO Claremore has been our variety we've gone to ever since the start, but we're playing around with other varieties. This year we got some Phoenix planted. We've actually mixed it with Claremore to help offset the seed costs, and so we're not so deep into the seed costs to get through winter in case we have a winter kill situation, but we'll see how that goes.
So with your HZ drills in seeding canola, what depth is it at that you're seeding?
Just depends. I mean, we've seen canola push 3.5, 4 inches if it has to. It doesn't turn out as good, but a lot of times we've been pretty lucky the last few years getting some pretty timely rains before we seed, or even summer to hold the moisture. And we're, 2 inches is pretty much ideal for us with the HZs. If we can get it around that 2-inch mark to pop out of the ground, we've had pretty good success. I should take a step back too. Our HZ drills, we're not using the conventional boxes in them. I set up I pull it with a 1910 cart or a flex coil 2320, and it's set up with air. So we're just basically using the seed boot and packer, but delivering our seed through the air cart. And I should mention our seed rates are down to, we're pretty comfortable with 2 to 2.2 pounds per acre on that Claremore.
Interesting. Many other panelists have any questions?
Hey Josh, how deep are you running with your fertilizer rig?
You're pretty much limited with the weight on that chisel plow. I pretty much sink it in basically to that hub. See if I can. Well, I gave up the control, but if you look at that coulter the way it is, if you run it to that hub, you're a good 4 inches deep. We're pretty comfortable with that. So.
Josh, on your HZ drills.
Okay, if we don't have any other questions, thank you, Josh, and we will move to Jesse Brunner next. Don't forget to unmute there, Jesse.
Oh, yep, sorry, my bad. Thanks a lot. Hi, my name is Jesse Brunner, and I farm north of Elmira, Washington, not too far away from Josh. We're also a 12-inch rainfall zone. We grow primarily winter crops, winter wheat and winter canola. We do maybe about 20% spring crop each year, but yeah, primarily winter crops on a fallow rotation. We've been no-till for about 20 years now. And I think as far as canola goes, that does kind of make things a little more difficult. The biggest challenge for me with winter canola is getting the darn thing out of the ground and through the winter. And those two things kind of go hand in hand. When I first started going canola, we tried seeding it right at the 1st of August, and that worked pretty well. Our moisture was shallow, and we were able to get a really great stand. The problem is it got too big, and come next spring, it looked pretty awful. Ours looked a lot like how Frank's did, except his came back and mine did not. And that ended up yielding pretty poorly for us. Since then, we've dialed back our seeding date to the end of August, and that seems to work a lot better. The challenge we've always had is that seed's so small, you can't plant it too deep, but you absolutely have to get it into moisture. And in a no-till fallow situation, that can really be the trick. For the past several years, I've been using a pillar laser disco drill. It's very similar to the Brigot disc drill, if you guys are familiar with those. And that's worked pretty well. In the beginning, we used the John Deere 1870 conserva pack, and I had really good luck with that until we started using a stripper header to harvest our wheat. And you cannot go through strip residue with that drill. So that led me down the disc drill route. And since we've been using the pillar, I've gotten decent stands, but I definitely wouldn't say I got everything figured out yet. I have a picture here from my seeding last fall. There it is. And so that's what's left after my pillar goes through stripped winter wheat residue. No, too far. That field looks pretty good right now. I think the biggest challenge we're having is all that residue over the seed row doesn't do the crop any favors. Kind of like Frank said, and I've heard other people say, you want less residue with canola. And I think there's kind of a happy medium on that. If you have nothing, I think it makes you more prone to the wind chill factor. So I want some residue, but what I have in this photo is definitely more than I desire. Going through, kind of like what Josh is doing, this last fall I bought a used John Deere 1890 disc drill, and my project for this winter is rebuilding that. We're going to be spacing it out to 20 inches and putting row cleaners on it. So hopefully I can go through residue such as this and just move it to the side and have a nice clean seed row. My hope is by doing that, I can retain all of this residue through the summer, because that really helps keep my moisture nice and shallow. You know, my goal is to seed the canola 2 inches deep or less if I can. And, you know, my hope is that this year will do that. I wish I could tell you it's going to work. I guess check back with me next year and we'll know for sure. But for now, that's the plan. As far as my fertility goes, part of managing my plant size going into winter is I don't have any fertility down pre-plant or at seeding. I do a liquid starter mix when I seed, but other than that, my primary nitrogen is put down late in the fall, you know, late November, early December, when everything's shut down, basically right before it snows. I'll do about 2/3 of my nitrogen and sulfur then, and then I'll do the last third in the spring. The whole idea with this is to keep my plant size at that 6 to 8 leaf stage going into winter. That seems to be the happy medium for us. Then in the spring, based on how much winter precipitation we got, I can adjust my fertilizer rates based on what my yield expectations are going forward from there. After that, once you get to spring, canola seems to get a lot easier for us. I should mention all the canola we grow is winter canola. I've experimented with spring canola in the past. The worst thing for spring canola is that the very first time I tried it, I got a fantastic crop, and I think that skewed my expectations. And I've never gotten anywhere near that yield ever since. And at this point, spring grown canola just doesn't really appeal to me, because it's kind of taken the place of a winter canola, and the winter canola just yields so much better. The one thing we do have to deal with in the spring is we do have a little bit of insect pressure. Typically, I will have to spray for cabbage seed pod weevils. You don't always have to, it just kind of depends on the year, but more often than not, that is something we have to deal with. That's pretty much it for me on my tactics for growing canola. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Yeah, Jesse, I guess I'm just be curious to know what kind of seed depth you're shooting for too with the drill you're using.
Typically, you know, if I can get to 2, it basically it's whatever gets me into the moisture. I want a good 1/2 inch of moisture over the top of that seed. In 2019, we got an inch of rain about 10 days before seeding, and I felt like I won the lottery. And I was able to seed my canola at about 1.25 inches, and I got the most perfect stand of canola I've ever gotten. Unfortunately, rains like that are like a 1 in a 20-year event. So, you know, in the absence of that, I seed however deep I have to go to get to moisture. I can tell you this last fall, I had a field the moisture was pretty questionable on, and I seeded about 2.5 to 3 inches with a FlexiCoil 5000 hoe drill, and that did not work. I attribute that to that drill just packs too much, and I didn't even get 5% of the stuff out of the ground. I think the HZ drills work so well because they don't pack over the seed. The problem is you have to base all your farming practices around getting that HZ into the ground,
which requires tillage.
And if that works, if that's part of your normal operation, then yeah, great, use an HZ. But that's not what we've been doing, so I've had to find other ways.
Yeah. Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, I've got another question. If anybody can see and hear me, but
Yep.
I have a question on whether you fly on any fungicides or with your insecticide or any boron or anything like that.
Typically, I do put some boron with my insecticide. I'll also put boron down with both of my regular top dress fertilizer applications, but I definitely put it in with the insecticide because you're right at flowering. I've done some experiments with fungicide. It's something I plan to experiment with going forward, but so far I haven't seen any real benefit to them. But I'm not giving up on them yet either.
Yeah. Josh, got
Yeah, I got a question. Jesse, have you seen on your canola fallow after you've harvested canola and that next year, have you seen any difference in moisture, kind of like a side-by-side situation and versus your wheat stubble and your canola stubble? Does it dry down a little more at all?
Yeah, I do feel like my moisture is a little bit deeper following canola than it is following wheat. I expect that just because there's so much less surface residue to shield things. That's actually one thing I'm hoping with the John Deere 1890 on 20-inch spacing. I'm gonna be able to leave a lot of that wheat residue on the surface and unmolested through the year that the crop's in canola, and hopefully that'll still be there for the next year after the canola's been harvested to help preserve my moisture coming back into wheat. But yeah, I'm not gonna know for like 4 years how well that works out.
okay. Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate it. With that, we will move to myself. Again, I'm Chris Riggers. I farm in north, kind of central Idaho. You can see there on the map, Lewis County. We grow primarily wheat, canola, legumes, grass seed, barley, fairly diverse crop rotation. We're in about a 20-inch annual average precipitation area. We're somewhat high elevation. We're about 3,500 to 4,000 feet. So we get a fair amount of rain, and we have usually pretty mild summers compared to a lot of other areas. So it's really a great area for raising canola. We've been growing it. My dad and his brother started growing it at least 20 years ago. And I know that they've told me that it's come a long ways since then. So we've had a lot of success growing it. We like growing it, and I, definitely foresee us growing it well into the future. Canola makes up about 20 to 30% of our farm's acres each year. Although with the recent rally, I think we may be pushing that even more next spring. We grow a mix between winter and spring canola. Just kind of depends on the year. Next year, we'll probably have more spring canola than winter. Other years, it's more winter canola than spring. It just depends. We have a Seed Master drill. It's a hoe style opener. It's on 12-inch spacing. It's got separate seed and fertilizer placement. It's real similar to a Conservapack or a Seed Hawk, very similar. We like it a lot. We've had it for 5 years now. We find it has excellent seed placement and does a great job of hitting our seeding rate targets. It's got the onboard kind of a Valmar style seed metering tank, and it comes out of Canada. And as you guys know, those guys are canola experts up there. So we've been very happy with the job that it does for us in both winter and spring canola seeding. I guess I'll talk about seeding depth real quick. We shoot for, in the spring stuff, we'll shoot for 1/2 inch at the shallowest to about 1 inch at the deepest. We never really have any moisture issues in the spring, so it's just, getting good seed to soil contact, consistent depth, and getting it up out of the ground and going. We'll start seeding that as early as we can in the spring usually. Winter canola, we'll seed it just however deep we have to hit moisture. I guess I'll start, with our fertility plans. We'll target in the winter canola 150 to 170 pounds of nitrogen, 30 to 35 pounds of phos, 30, 35 pounds of sulfur. Then we'll include a micro package with early bloom fungicide application. And, that's got potassium, copper, zinc, iron, manganese, boron, all the good stuff. So in the winter canola, we're pushing it pretty hard. We may even go a little higher than that on the nitrogen and sulfur in the spring if conditions are really good and the crop looks good. The last few years, we've had really good weather for it, and field averages anywhere from 4,000 to 5,000 pounds, or 80 to 100 bushel in Frank's case. So like I said, we're really trying to push the fertility on that, and it's paid off so far in the last few years. Had a lot of success with it. Spring canola, we're targeting, depending on seeding date, if we get out with a good early seeding date, things look good, we'll push it up to around 100 pounds of nitrogen, 25 to 30 pounds of phos, 20, 25 pounds of sulfur, same micro package. And that is usually applied again at an early bloom fungicide application. We found with our climate, the fungicides, especially in the winter canola, have paid off the last few years. We usually throw in one at the herbicide application in the early spring, and then again at bloom. And just with our, like I said, cool, wet climate, it seems like the fungicides have been worth it. We can have dry summers, hot and dry summers, and the spring canola can really take a beating in those conditions. But the winter canola, the nice thing about it is it matures in that time where we really rarely get much heat, and so it just blooms forever, it seems like. And I think that's what is probably the biggest contributor to its yields. In terms of how we split out those applications, the spring canola is pretty simple and straightforward. We'll usually either do that all in one pass through the drill when we seed, or if, depending on the fall, we may go out and do some fall fertilizing for spring crops. And, in that case, we'll put on maybe 70 pounds of nitrogen and the phosphorus, and then we'll put the rest on when we seed in the spring, maybe with the drill, or maybe top dress, stream it on. The winter canola, just echoing what all you guys have said, a lot of it just revolves around the residue management and moisture management for us. So we always plant winter canola on a fallow year following it's on, winter wheat ground or maybe spring grain ground, wheat or barley. And what we do is we will harrow it 2 to 3 times, usually with a spike tooth harrow or a Degelman heavy harrow. And we just try to get the stubble broken up, spread around, just kind of get it started breaking down. And then with our drill, the hoe style opener, we feel is able to create enough black dirt to, like you guys have all said, to keep that growing point down close to the ground and help with your winter survivability. So that's what's worked well for us. We've got really good stands that way. It of course just, depends on the summer. We've had nice, cool, wet summers the last few years, so that makes all the difference in the world. But kind of with that system, just harrowing the residue, getting it spread out, broken down, and this is, a lot of times 100 bushel wheat residue that we're trying to manage. The harrowing 3-4 times seems to do the trick, and then like I said, with the drill coming through, it makes a nice black seed row, and has worked well for us the last few years. So this is winter canola stand coming out of the ground. You can see how much the ground has been blackened up. Then that's all we did is harrow that. I guess I forgot to mention, sometimes with the winter canola, we may put down the 30 pounds of nitrogen. I'll go back. 30 pounds of nitrogen, 35 pounds of phos and sulfur pre-plant, maybe early summer, June timeframe, as soon as things get dried out and we can cross all the draws and things like that. So we'll put that down pre-plant or at seeding. We've done both. The last couple of years, I've kind of liked to do it pre-plant because we're usually seeding the canola at the same time we're harvesting. So if we have all the fertilizer down beforehand, you just throw the guy in the drill, he goes out and gets it done, and you don't have to worry about him. Like I said, we've had success both ways. But then we'll come in the late fall, like Jesse was saying, we'll do pretty much the same thing, and we'll stream pretty much all the rest of the fertility on real late fall when things have pretty much stopped. And if we have really good conditions and the crop looks good coming out of winter, we may throw a little more fertility on in the spring. It just, kind of depends. We've split that late fall top dress. We've done it where we do some in the fall and some in the spring. Kind of goes back to logistics. I just kind of like getting it done and out of the way, because then when spring starts, we're into, seeding and top dress and wheat and other things. So doing it late, I think we're not losing too much, and kind of eases up logistics on the farm come spring too. Our biggest issue with establishment in both winter and spring has been flea beetles, especially in winter canola. Spring, it's not too bad. It's, the stuff is growing so fast, it can usually outgrow it, and it's cold and they're just not as active. But the winter canola, we've really struggled with at times. And the biggest thing we've noticed is if you have a spring canola field, because this is, the winter canola is coming out of the ground in early August, and the spring canola is not harvested yet. And if you have a field of winter canola that you've seeded anywhere near a spring canola field, the flea beetles will just annihilate it. And so we have to, we've got to the point where we have to, or our agronomist is checking it every day and checking for flea beetles. And if we start getting any whiff of them, we're out there either with the sprayer, with our sprayer, or the plane spraying the flea beetles. Sometimes if we get on them soon enough, we can just do the borders and that controls them. We don't always have to do the whole field. It just depends, you know, but that has been our biggest challenge. And I think the biggest challenge for most growers in our area with winter canola stand establishment in the last few years is just controlling the flea beetle. And you can see how much damage they can do. So not very fun when those things wipe out a crop. Very similar to Frank's grasshoppers, I'm sure. Finally, so this is a field of winter canola that's in the ground right now. This photo was taken October 15th. This field was seeded August 3rd. So this is Mercedes. So it looks really good. We're real happy with the stand. We had great conditions for seeding, and we've had a really mild winter, and things look really good. So let's just hope that winter doesn't take a hard turn and beat the crap out of it. But we'll see. Things look good now, so we're pleased and quite optimistic. I think that's pretty much all I have. Any questions from any of you guys? Aaron?
Yeah, I have one, Chris. If you is your stuff typically GMO or non-GMO? Are you half and half, or what are you doing for spring and winter?
Yeah. For winter, we primarily grow non-GMO. We have grown some GMO. Just depends on the field situation. If we're not too worried about weed control, or if the field doesn't have too big of weed issues, we'll definitely go with non-GMO. For us, it's yielded quite a bit better than the GMO has. Spring canola, on the other hand, we're primarily GMO spring canola, all Roundup ready. We like it just gives us a chance to clean up a lot of weeds. As you guys know, weeds are a little harder to control with a lot of fall crops. So any chance you get with a Roundup ready spring canola to go in and clean up weeds, we like to take that. So we raise some of both, have had good success with both. So. Any other questions?
I got a question on your summer fertilizer application. Is that a stream jet as well, or how are you putting if you put it down before?
Yeah. We haven't streamed it. The last couple of years, I've actually just used our Seed Master to put on the fertilizer. I've done a couple different things, ran it all liquid, the phos and night, everything liquid. Or since we're not using the seed tank for that, I've ran some 1152 through the seed tank for our phosphorus source, and then usually some 32 and thiazole for the nitrogen and sulfur. We've also used like the McGregor, fertilizer machines, something like that. But like I said, we like to do it in the early summer if we do, and then get it harrowed up behind that application and spread the residue out over the top of it. And that seems to really help conserve the moisture. Kind of like what you guys do in a fallow situation. You guys call it like a dust mulch, I think, right? That's kind of our goal. What we're trying to do with our fertilizer application is just create a couple inches of mulch on the top to help keep the moisture up near that level for when we seed.
Gotcha. And then on your winter canola, what's your, like the Mercedes seed rate?
Usually about 3 to 3.5 pounds. This stand that we got here this year, we probably could have gone a lot lower than that, but it just depends. But usually we're right around 3 pounds, and with the spring canola, similar 2.5 to 3 pounds with the spring canola. Anyone else? If not, we will move to Aaron and wrap up with him.
All right, whenever we get that shared over. I guess can everybody hear me okay? I assume so. My name's Aaron G. Feller, and I farm 45 minutes south of Spokane, Washington, in the middle of Whitman County. We are about 24-inch rainfall zone, and we are strictly in a 3-year rotation, with a third being in winter wheat, a third being in malting barley, and a third is usually split between canola and some sort of legume, whether it's garbanzo beans, lentils, or peas. We sometimes do a little bit of summer fallow once in a while, but not very often. So we started growing the canola about 4 or 5 years ago, mainly for grassy weed control. We've got some grassy weeds out our direction that are just starting to get out of hand. Mostly Italian ryegrass, or there are even areas where oats are starting to become a definite issue. So for that, we in the fall, we typically use a 2410 chisel that's on 12-inch space, and we go out there and chisel our barley ground up and try to get that residue to break down. Our malting barley, depending which variety it is, the current one is CDC Copeland, and it can get 4 or 5 feet tall, and there's just an awful lot of residue out there. So we try to get that stuff incorporated and broken up. As a heavy harrow doesn't, you can do it once or twice and it just doesn't cut it. You got to try to incorporate it somehow. So we do that in the fall, and then we'll let it sit all winter. And then in the spring, we come in with a 50-foot Degelman tine harrow with 6-bar spike tooth or flex harrow behind it, and we'll cross it once, and then we'll come in and we use a 45-foot McGregor anhydrous fertilizer ripper. It's on 12-inch spacing, and put it in. We deep band it. This goes down about 4 inches, and we're putting down 85 pounds of nitrogen, or 100, kind of depending on the conditions, and 15 pounds of phosphorus, 20 to 25 pounds of sulfur, and we do put down 7 pounds of chloride with our soils. Some of our soils seem to be definitely low on the chloride end of things. And after we do that, we come back and we take the tine harrow again. We go over it one more time just to kind of pack it back down and bring that moisture back up to the surface. We don't like to let it sit and be fluffy for too long. The type of drill we use isn't quite one that has enough down pressure to really penetrate a lot of some of those conditions, or it seeds too deep, one or the other. But our drill is a John Deere 455 double disc conventional drill on 7.5-inch spacing with 3-inch packer wheels. We do have a slowdown kit that we use in it to help slow down the flutes so we can get our seed rate down. And we also, their drill has 3 separate boxes for to hold the seed, and each box has its own drill shut off. So when you get to the end of your row and you turn the corner, you aren't double seeding, it'll automatically shut them off, just like your sprayer with your section control does. And that's really helped us get our seeding rate down to about the 3 to 4 pound range for spring canola. And we've been pretty happy with that, with our plant stands and everything else. So we really won't change much there. As far as setting the openers go, or you're setting your flutes go, we typically set it down to 0 or below 0, and then come back, and you're shooting for about a credit card width or a quarter size, a thickness of a quarter's width, showing on all your flutes all the way across. And like I said, that's kind of helped us keep our seed costs down. And we typically then shoot for anywhere between 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep. Try not to go too much deeper than that, otherwise emergence takes a little while. And the other thing too is on our side hills, it has a tendency, not only does the drill draft back there, and then the packer wheels end up not packing the seed in, then you end up having too much, there's almost 2 inches worth of soil it's got to punch through to come up and emerge. And so sometimes that can be an issue. So we try not to go too deep in the spring. And the type of varieties that we have been raising are the GMO type, Winfield 955 or 930. And they used to carry a variety, or I guess it was a mixture of 50-50 called 730, and I don't believe they carry that anymore. So we've gone mostly just to a straight variety instead of a blend. As far as any sort of top dress or anything like that, at herbicide timing, I have put on 16 ounces of boron when I go out and spray for weeds, and then I also put on another 16 ounces of boron. I know 16 ounces. That's not that's of the product. I'm trying to remember what the actual concentration is, and I don't have that off the top of my head. But anyway, so we do put on boron at herbicide timing, and then we do put on boron when we go to fly for bugs, which is your cabbage pod weevil or some other sometimes we have army worms starting to come in. We have seen that. But it's mostly just for flea beetles and cabbage pod. So we will put on boron there, and I have put on fungicide this last year, definitely, just because of all the rains we had in the late June. It needed it. The year before, I didn't put any on, and come harvest time, you could see there were pods out there that we definitely could have used a fungicide application. It was, I think, Alternaria blight is what it ended up getting. It didn't affect the yield greatly, but it was in areas you could see it, kind of in the lower bottoms. So we figured we better start, if it's going to be a cooler, wetter June, and there's going to be those big droplets on your lower leaves, it's kind of like a rainforest out there. You kind of need to go after it with a fungicide, otherwise you're going to have some sort of issues. So that's kind of what we've been doing there. We do fly on micronutrients as well. We've used, I'm trying to think what the combination was. It's just a little bit of boron, a little bit more of calcium, magnesium. I'm trying to remember. It's what the McGregor's has improve in there, and whatever they have on that one, and it seems to do pretty well. So, because there are some of the micronutrients we are definitely deficient in our soils, and we feel that we need to be able to take care of that at bloom. So, other than that, there really isn't a whole lot as far as the differences from you guys. It's, we typically just do spring canola. We have not tried the winter canola route yet. I'm hoping to do that here this next year or the year following. So, are there any other questions?
Aaron, what rough percentage of your guys' total acres does canola make up?
It makes up probably 20% of our overall acres. So probably, about 20%. Yep.
Are there, is canola very popular up in your area? Are you one of the few growers, or is it grown pretty widely?
No, it's definitely kind of an emerging thing. We've been watching our neighbors. We farm some ground just north of Pullman, and we have some neighbors I've been watching for the last 6 or 7 years that have been growing it. And I finally got my dad on board to grow it here at home on the home place, which is more towards the Steptoe Thornton area. And we are the only ones out this way raising the canola, the spring canola, definitely. Until you get out more towards the St. John, towards the west end of the county, where it's definitely drier and guys are using the winter canolas in some spring. But it's not nearly as popular. I think you're going to see that popularity go up, one because of price, and like I mentioned earlier, the some of the weed control is getting to be an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions from any of you guys? I do have a question for Frank. Again, Frank, I'd love if you could just give a quick summary of growing spring canola in Canada and maybe the differences that you've seen down here versus what your experience was growing it up there.
Okay, so in Canada, we were in about 16 inches of average moisture per year. It's always a trick when we talk about average moisture, as everyone knows. I mean, we had anywhere from maybe down to 10 inches and up to 24 inches. But basically, in Canada, I always like to joke and say, well, we robbed the crop between two snows. So our first seeding date was really the last week of April. And Halloween was really that first snow that was going to stay around winter for the winter. So it's not uncommon to harvest a crop and then have snow 3-4 weeks later. As far as spring canola and what's making me hesitant to try by Three Forks is that in Canada you have a fairly cool months of June and July still, so it works okay with having a flowering still. When we get to Three Forks, we get this 100-degree weather that's really hard on flowering, and that's where I feel that winter canola has a whole lot better chance to work because of it. So that's one of the I think the bigger things that we have. Plus, when you look at the moisture curve for a regular year. In Canada, we would, so like I said, we'd seed that first week of May, and then June would be our wettest month, really. Well, in Three Forks, we're about a month earlier, so it's very conducive to more winter crops. And having spring canola in Montana makes it a whole lot tougher when you have that double whammy of a hotter flowering season and then no more rain coming into July. So these are some of the bigger things. The seeding side of it, you were talking about the Seedmaster drill, and that's what I had in Canada. No doubt that these companies they developed these independent row openers with on row packing. They were developed right there. I was 20 miles from the Seedmaster factory. They are definitely. I mean, I don't think there's a better canola drill than a Seedmaster or Seed Hog, followed closely by by the Borgo and these types of drills. They were definitely great drills for that. So yeah, we weren't able to do winter canola, and I think it'd be very difficult to have winter canola survive in Canada. And yeah, see how we're gonna go. I didn't mention we grew Roundup Ready winter canola in Three Forks this past year. We have a bit of a test with some Rubisco seeds that are that's the Clearfield type. There's definitely the advantage of if it all works out to have the non-GMO premium as well. So yeah, looking at all these things, but I think as the panel, the whole panel, the biggest thing about canola is the establishment, whether it's fall or spring, getting that small seed to germinate properly and come out of the ground, and by the time it gets to cabbage, if it does a very nice cabbage, well, you're halfway there.
Yeah. What I'm assuming spring canola yields up in Saskatchewan are they're 50 to 60 plus bushels usually on average.
Depending where it's amazing how the genetics and the practices over time have really improved. Let's say in the early 2000s, if you had 30 to 40 bushels, you were doing well. So 1,500 to 2,000 pounds. And but as of the last few years, that 2,500 bush that 50 bushel mark, 2,500 pound is kind of where it's at, and into the between it went from 30 to 40 to 40 to 60 bushel as some of the target yields, and no doubt some of these varieties have really greatly improved. And not only that, I think the straight cut varieties, the pod shatter varieties, have really added some potential, because since before, when they had these easily shattering varieties, people would be swathing their canola a whole lot earlier so they wouldn't lose any. With these pod shatter varieties, there's a whole lot more yield that can get into the pod.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks you guys. With that, we're gonna turn it over to questions from the viewers. So if you're watching this and you have a question for any of us up here, please type it into the chat box and we will get them answered. Thank you.
I just needed to, this is Karen, I got a few slides this morning that I wanted to add to this discussion right after the grower panel. Josh, if you're on, can you unmute and talk about these next couple slides?
Yeah, there was a question about how we were looking and what we were looking at as far as our winter. I just went across the road from the shop and took a picture. So that's basically how we're looking now. Like I said, we got kind of a false start last week. Stuff greened up a little bit down in the crown, but I think we're still we're good and froze up now. I think it's 16 degrees here or something, but we'll put her to the test here in the next few days. Like everybody else, gonna get cold and wind with it. But like I mentioned, I think it was 2 years ago, we had sub-zero open winter, and our Claremore did fine. I mean, I've heard people say, and I'm a believer of it too. I think if our canola is dead, our wheat's probably going to be right with it. Is how far they've come with these varieties.
And then Josh, you had during the combine settings thing yesterday, you mentioned rollers, or maybe you didn't, but you sent some pictures of rollers.
Yeah, just with using the air cart, whether it's Flex Coil or John Deere, they were talking yesterday about how slow they got to go to get the rates down with your transmission on an air cart. But that's just, I'm sure people have seen this. I know Jesse actually, he kind of made his own. I've seen pictures of his, but the Flex Coil one's similar. You can buy that Flex Coil roller. I think the first year I did it, I was down around 6 to 8 on my flex coil transmission, and we struggled with it. And ever since I put that flex coil roller in, I think I'm up around 25 or 26 on my transmission. So it sped it up quite a bit. And then the John Deere roller on the left there, I think I could probably add a couple more rings. I don't know if there's plenty of guys running John Deere carts. Maybe they've done the same, and have even more rings in there, block out rings. Same thing on the Deere transmission. I'm up around, I think 24 or 25 for 2 to 3 pounds of canola. Instead of the first year I tried it with less rings than that, I was way lower. And those, I know the John Deere cart does not like to go slow. The flex coil does do a little better on the lower rates than the John Deere, but adding those rings.
Thanks, Josh. And then Aaron, are you on video, unmute?
Yeah, I'm there.
There you go. So Aaron wanted to show a few pictures from his farm. Aaron, go ahead.
Oh, these are just the spring canola pictures off the taken from my dad's airplane during bloom. You can see the 2 fields there. We have summer follow-up on top. Basically, we had a pretty good stand more than anything else out of that. That's a pretty level piece of ground for the most part. There are some steeper areas, but this is taken down in the flat there next to the highway there. And like I said, we had a really good stand out of it all. We did have kind of a rain event, historical rain event happen about the site when it was about 4 inches in diameter. And at first I thought it wiped a whole bunch of it out, but it ended up coming right through it and then branching out and doing pretty well. Let's see if you go on to maybe the next picture or 2. If I can move it. This picture is taken on the first year I grew canola. It was just a thin 30-acre patch I had at the kind of a narrow spot in a flat. And this was a 9. I think this was that mistake that Winfield made. I think I talked about that in the presentation, but that blend of 955 and 930 was a mistake and they sent it out. But that's what this stand was. And I think that was all right around 2,300 pounds. And it was seeded in, I don't know, I think it was the 2nd week of May, which was pretty late. We normally try to shoot to put our canola in before our garbanzo beans. And because this was an experiment, it went in after our garbanzo beans in May. There in the background, you can see the malt barley. That stuff, like I said before, gets really tall or can get really tall on wetter, cooler years, and definitely creates an issue for us with residue. And that's kind of the same picture. My daughter there is about, I think she was about 4 foot, about that stage. And so the canola is getting pretty tall there. I think that was taken in early June, like the 1st, 2nd week of June. That was that first year we raised that canola. And then this was last year's canola. We were cutting that stuff, and it was just a good stand. We tried to seed things more up and down the hills rather than on the side of a hill, just to keep the draft down and to keep the emergence, more to the surface as far as the seed depth goes, which kind of creates some, trying to lay fields out a little differently is a little interesting. We normally try to do contour, but up and down, it seems to work better as far as that emergence goes.
What's the steepest slope that you've had canola on?
We've had it on, we have the Rayco levelers on the 9770 and 9760 of ours, and I think they're at least 40%. So our levelers will go to 35. So sometimes we do sit sideways in the cab. So anyway, this is just another picture. I thought it was kind of fun just because it was in the evening.
I think that's all I got on there, Aaron. Chris, are you on?
Yeah. I think we've done a pretty good job of answering all the questions in the chat section. I think, Jim Davis, did you have a question for Josh regarding the HZ drills you wanted to ask?
Yes, thanks. Josh, on your HZ drills, do you have that extra packer unit that runs along behind the split wheels to firm it up right over the seat, or do you leave it fluffy?
We we haven't had to run those. Just like I mentioned, we've been pretty lucky last few years to we've been pretty firm. I think if we got into a real dry year and we're battling, having to go a little deeper, I will run those. But typically I don't run them unless I had to.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions, guys? If not, I will turn it back over to Karen to wrap things up, and just want to say thanks to everybody. Thanks to the panelists that helped put this together, and thanks to all you guys for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. And again, here's a list of all the panelists, whether or not you were on both days or not. It's a pretty big list, and I think we owe all of these individuals a big thank you for the time to prepare and give their presentations and also be answering questions. Again, thanks everybody for joining us the last 2 days, or even if you were just on today. Thank you, because we know there's a lot of other meetings going on today and yesterday. So thanks for choosing this one, and hope to see you guys in the field this summer, guys and gals. So again, thanks to everybody.